I've always tried to use a full-size antenna because they work best. But HF antennas are big, so hams can't always use a full-size antenna. This is especially true when going portable, which is becoming increasingly popular, and I'm happy to see that. Many hams then opt for a coil-loaded vertical. They're not difficult to deploy and don't draw undue attention like some ham in a park trying to throw a wire up over a limb. I don't like being a public spectacle, believe it or not. People wondering, what's that nut doing? Hey there, what are you doing? Might even draw the attention of the authorities, or even worse, the neighborhood Karen. There are many of these portable verticals available today. Some are quite expensive, but not all of them. Here is the popular JPC-12 antenna available on Amazon for about $140. Here it is in its carrying bag, the size of a lady's purse. How do they get a 13.5-foot antenna in this little bag? Well, the bottom half of the antenna is these aluminum tubes. There are 4 of them. You just screw them together. Then, once you got all those tubes screwed together, this loading coil goes on the top, and then on the top of the loading coil, you have this telescopic whip. Has a brass bottom section here. Now, at the very bottom of the tube section is this base with your coax connector. And then you got this metal spike, which goes into the ground, and it screws into the bottom of this bottom section. And you also get this manual, which explains how to use this antenna. And they also provide you with your typical ribbon cable for radials. And here it is, all disassembled in its nice little bag. Now, since this antenna is almost the same length as a full-size 20-meter quarter-wave vertical, it only uses a few turns in the coil for 20. So for all practical purposes, it is a full-size antenna on 20 meters. Now, what you really need the coil for is 40 meters, and I like that the coil is center-mounted on the antenna. That has a lot less loss than a base-loaded coil. So I'm going to take this to the beach, which is just a few miles from here, and for a transmitter, I'm going to be using this little Whisper beacon transmitter, which puts out 200 milliwatts, 1/5 of a watt. And we'll see how this antenna does in the evening on 40 meters. Here's the JPC-12 fully deployed. There's the coil. It actually doesn't look much different from the fishing poles these guys use here on the beach. So down here, got your coax, 25 feet of RG-174. That ribbon cable, which they supply as the radials, I just split it in half because all those little tiny wires, I turn it into a rat's nest. So we're using basically 3 radials because the shield of the coax is one of the radials. An RF choke here because without that, since I'm using the shield as a radial, I never get a good and accurate SWR reading. Here it connects to the Whisper transmitter. There is the GPS antenna. And there's the 5-volt power supply. So basically, only three radials. You need more than that, but when this is your ground plane, this ground plane really makes a difference. Now, this antenna was really easy to put up. It just took a few minutes. and it is not conspicuous. And that's something I like about it, being here in a public area. Now, somebody with SWRDS, SWR derangement syndrome, might say, well, why didn't you use a better coax? Get a better signal. In this case, 25 feet of RG 174, 40 meters, SWR 1.5, has a total loss of about 1/2 of a dB. So it makes no difference. So, how'd this antenna perform? Well, first of all, here's the SWR, near perfect match. And here is the whisper map. This is me here in Central Florida, and signals here tend to propagate right up the coast and into Europe. This is St. Helena Island, where they exiled Napoleon. And looking at the database, my strongest signal was a -6 dB. Now keep in mind, this is with 200 milliwatts, 1/5 of a watt. KX40 picked that up, followed by -7 dB, KM3T, and then -8 K1RA. My farthest contact was ZD7GB. That's the station in St. Helena Island, over 9,400 kilometers at -22 dB. Then that's followed by OE3XOE in Austria, -16 dB. Not bad. So the JPC-12, it goes up and comes down fast and easy, works as expected, very thin and light, so has little wind resistance and does not draw much attention. So are the more expensive versions of this antenna by other sellers going to work any better? No. So up to you, but why pay more? Consider subscribing to this channel, ring the bell for updates, and 73.